Please welcome Andrea Fletcher to the stage.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so excited to kick off the session with you all, but first, I would like to introduce our lovely panelists. From left to right, we have Brooke Rhodes, Riemer, Daniel Fox, and Zack Ovits. You'll hear more from them later, and you'll have plenty of time to ask these experts anything, so during the talk, please keep questions in mind and save them for our extended Q&A at the end. And with that, hello developers. My name is Andrea Fletcher. I'm an engineering manager on the Design Systems and Accessibility team here at Roblox, and I am here to talk to you all about UI frameworks and how they can impact your development. So first, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Making experiences on Roblox is super fun, really easy to get started, but making complex, resilient UI is surprisingly challenging. Creation, organization, testing is tricky, even with the most experienced developers. With a lot of individual components, it's hard to make things consistent. Bugs pop up if state isn't updated regularly, and making large-scale changes to your UI can feel impossible and overwhelming. And UI frameworks can simplify this greatly. Individual components are made in one place and reused across all surfaces. And the way that UI frameworks are designed makes some common UI bugs just impossible to have. And developing is easier too. You can develop entire UIs without ever pressing play in Studio. We define a UI framework as a package that helps handle the logic and creation of UI. And in this talk, we will focus on two very popular UI frameworks at Roblox, React and Fusion. React is a state-based UI framework. It regenerates UI when a change in state happens, re-rendering, adding, removing items until they're up to date. And Fusion is more logic-based. You connect objects together to describe your UI, and then you plug the pieces together. So here, you can see a coin counter UI in both React and Fusion. The code might look a little different and maybe unlike other Roblox code that you've seen, but they both have the same end result. This is a fairly simple example, but you might notice a couple differences in basic syntax, how you initialize components, how you reference props, and how variables are, or how state is held. So React Lua, you might also know this as Roact, React Luau. React is a transpiled version of the web's React framework, and with a couple extra additions that make it uniquely suited for Roblox development. And if you didn't already know, the Roblox app is written almost entirely in React. So this is what any Lua engineer, including myself at Roblox, works with all day, every day. The Lua-specific documentation is not the most comprehensive, but because this is transpiled from web, there are loads of existing resources on the web for this. Now, Fusion has been in development since 2019 and made its public debut in 2021. The creator of Fusion is our own Daniel Fox, and And like I mentioned earlier, Fusion is logic-based, and one of the major benefits is that it's super lightweight, especially when you compare it to React. And if you find yourself doing lots of tiny micro-interaction animations in your UI, definitely check Fusion out, because it makes this stuff super, super easy. So one of the things that we wanted to leave the audience with after this talk is a sample project made in both frameworks. So you can see this Figma up here made by Daniel, and this is for an inventory UI. Inventory is something that almost every experience has, and it's also something that's really hard to build. It's notoriously bug-ridden, it's not that fun, and it's really complex to develop. So we have demo projects written in both, and we'll show off some of the differences and how these were both written and developed in the next couple slides. Here is a quick video of the demo built by Pepper in React Lua. Again, we have QR codes and short links, so feel free to open these up, look at the code on your own devices, check it out later, and if you have any questions, save them for the end, because you'll be able to ask people who've authored these anything on your mind. So what I want to highlight here is the usage of plugins to improve engineering efficiency. This is all outside of a play session, and Pepper's able to test different color combos and different behaviors in scripted UI by using HorseCat. I work in React Lua all day, and I press play maybe once or twice a week to test very specific things. And here is the same demo project built by Fusion and Daniel. So Daniel went a little above and beyond in adding animations to show off the benefits of the framework. So you can see that the numbers wiggle a little bit when you hover over them, and the button gradients shift, and it makes the UI feel really alive. And this would take maybe a lot of effort in normal Roblox UI development, but it's so easy with Fusion. So now, we'll answer the question that everyone's been asking. Which of these frameworks are better? And our answer is, they are both fantastic. Sorry to disappoint. But there are, of course, pros and cons to each. React has a lot of documentation due to it being transpiled from an incredibly popular web framework. But it might have a higher learning curve, and it's not necessarily performant by default. Fusion is lightweight, more familiar with people who have experience building Roblox UI, and it makes animating incredibly easy, but it tends to be a little more verbose. And UI frameworks are not for everyone, and definitely not for every project. They will cause you fewer bugs, and they will improve your developer efficiency and keep things more organized, but familiarity takes a while to develop, and things might move a little slower at first, and you'll probably have a smaller hiring pool within Roblox developers. So that we have a guide to how to get started with UI frameworks. And because we know that it can be really daunting, and we know that people try it out and drop off because it's really intimidating. So this is what we've come up with as a way to get started, get familiar with developing with UI frameworks. So first, check out tutorials. We have some new staff articles and community articles that you can find on the dev forum, and maybe you even check out the source code for our demo project. Next, and arguably at the same time, please check out plugins. Plugins are the biggest benefit or the biggest value add when you're using UI frameworks. It can save you a ton of time, and it just makes the organization of your code so much better. And once you've played around with the frameworks a bit, dive into a project. Everyone learns and develops differently, but we found that keeping your expectations realistic, picking off an achievable chunk, an achievable part of a project, can really help you push through any obstacles. And speaking of pushing through obstacles, there is an amazing community out there of open source developers and experts in the space, all of these people included, that are very active in the open source Discord server. So they will help unblock you with any questions. It's a really great community. I highly recommend joining and getting to know these people. And speaking of that, there is a booth downstairs, All Things Luau, where we will all be hanging out after lunch. So if you want to come by, ask us questions, learn more about open source in general, please stop by. We'd love to talk to you. Now, on to the good stuff. I am going to kick off Q&A with our first question. Panelists, I would love each of you to introduce yourselves and then tell us a way that UI frameworks have impacted you in your projects. We will start off with Pepper.
Yeah, so I am Pepper, or kampfkarren. You may remember me from the forums, from Celine, Data Store 2, and HorseCat, but my primary project right now is My Movie. It is a game where you make 2D animations. There can be up to more than like 30 images and avatars from the marketplace on screen at a time that I don't control, so it needs to be very performant, and React makes that completely fine. As the only engineer working on My Movie, I have found that React helps greatly increase my velocity, both in terms of its ability to help me release massive updates very quickly, but also in its ability to drastically minimize the amount of issues that come from it. So despite having 50,000 lines of UI code, there's only really a couple of noticeable bugs, and the performance is really good. This is a big deal for me because I'm often only working on My Movie for a couple hours a day, and yet I'm still able to release pretty large updates on a frequent basis. My workflow is like the one you saw before of the shop. I am basically never clicking play until the update is finished. Greatly increases my speed to release stuff. I'm building the whole UI out in code, which in your head might seem a lot slower than using the UI editor or changing properties, but the big benefit is that it is completely interactive. So instead of just seeing how my UI will look like, I can see how my UI will feel like and actually use like. And I can avoid having to wait for my place to load and all that. I see it instantly.
Amazing answer. Okay, next up, switching over to Fusion, we'll hear from Zack about how it's impacted his development of Lua Learning.
Hi RDC, I'm Zack, although you probably know me as boatbomber. I've been on Roblox since 2011, and for the past 6.5 years now, I've been working on Lua Learning, which is a UI-based educational experience. And thank you. So as you can imagine, I was 15 when I started, and the code base has seen a lot of change. Initially, it was imperative, which meant that I was manually creating the UI instances in Studio, and then at runtime, kind of like cloning them in my scripts and putting them around, trying to attach behavior to it. It was very tedious, disorganized, and it made any kind of update take so long to build. And forget about accessibility. I mean, it was very not dynamic. I barely supported anything that wasn't a 16:9 screen, let alone dynamic text sizes. So when Dan showed me what he was working on back then, he was like, got this new declarative UI framework, and I immediately volunteered to be the guinea pig so that instead of just developing it in like small little test cases, let's try it with a real production use case. Let's rebuild Lua Learning from scratch in Fusion. Best decision I ever made. It is now super well organized. Everything is animated. There is now like text size and motion sickness and color blindness accessibility. And adding new pages, new sections now takes a matter of minutes when it used to be weeks, because we spent some time building up our component library. So when we have some new UI that we want to build, we just take these pieces and put them together, and we get to focus more on the user experience, try out different layouts. And as you can see there, Lua Learning, I got it to run at 1,800 frames per second on my mid-range gaming PC, which is just ridiculous. Fusion is super performant. And yeah, I mean, you'll hear more about it as we talk through the questions, but I am all in on Fusion.
Okay, it was a very compelling argument for Fusion. And now we'll hear from Brooke about React and Clip It.
Yeah, hi, I'm Brooke. I lead UI in an experience called Clip It. It's very similar to Pepper's game, My Movie, where it's a full UGC platform where players can publish clips to a global For You page in loads of different languages with dozens of different animating components. What I really want to focus on here is that we're trying to build a very native feeling mobile app, and React makes that really easy, or UI frameworks in general make that really easy, because we can create native interactions once and then use them everywhere. A good example of that is touch interactions, things like buttons, swipes, dragging, resizing, pinching to zoom, swiping on the feed. These are all things that we implement in one place, and then we can reuse infinitely everywhere, because React makes it very easy to compose behaviors and yeah, use them everywhere. Super quick, we're a 9-person team now, I think. Ship really fast, very few bugs, and like everybody else, we resonate with the same things. The workflow, it all happens in a Storybook plugin. We press play very few times. Makes it very quick to move.
Awesome. So I'm going to pass it off to Daniel, but first, right after this, we're going to open it up for Q&A. There's 2 microphones on the side, so if you want to go ahead and get up and line up, get your questions ready, we will kick it off to y'all right after this. Okay, Daniel, you're up.
All right, so hello everyone, I'm Dan, and I created Fusion, as well as a bunch of other things you might know me for, like plugins, Volumica, and the vanilla icon set. I've been getting around the place. But specifically, I wanted a better framework for all of my plugins to be built on, and that's what motivated me to make Fusion a long, long time ago. Almost 5 years ago now, which is insane. So my latest suite of plugins has a design system called Sensation, which has a bunch of components in, lots of small micro interactions, lots of tiny animations, some of the most complex ones I've ever shipped. And so I really need direct control over the low-level performance of every single part of my UI which Fusion is explicitly designed to give me. I'm explicitly designing everything to be thin, so I know exactly what's happening on the CPU. And also, Fusion, importantly, has one true workflow. So if you have an animation, you can pipe it right back into computations to do things like snapping to the pixel grid or adding extra flair with messages and string concatenation. There are a whole bunch of things that I do with animations more than just animating properties. And with that, it's incredibly easy to maintain dozens of micro-interactions as a one-man team. I do not have any other designers or any other employed programmers. I am just working on my own. And yet, I'm still shipping plugins like Relight and Reclass, and I'm having fun doing it. And so I really hope that with Fusion, every single person in this room can have a workflow just like that.
Awesome. Thank you, panelists. So it seems like we have some people ready with questions. Would you mind introducing yourself and asking your question?
Hi, I'm Xenosynthesis, former Roblox Accelerator intern, current Roblox teacher. I have a question for Daniel and Zach. As a fellow educator, a lot of my students are visual learners who don't like to type. They kind of grew up without keyboards. Are there any plans for a Fusion or even is there a plan for a code visualizer such as Blockly, Scratch, or even Unreal Engine's graph node editor for Fusion?
All right, should I take this one?
Yeah.
Wonderful. OK, so I've thought about this a fair amount, actually. Visual editing is one of the biggest roadblocks between UI designers and UI developers at the moment. Like, one of the top feedback items I keep on hearing is that I don't want to have to look at code in order to build my UIs. I want to be able to have something more intuitive and visual, like Roblox's UI editor. This has definitely been on my mind. And so I would love to have like more node-based UI editing, much more visual UI editing, maybe even something conducive to touch. But at the moment, there's nothing directly on the roadmap, but it's been going through my brain like there's no tomorrow. So, yeah.
I also want to take this as an opportunity to shout out Codify, I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced, but it's a plugin that you can build your UI the way you're used to, using the UI editor in Roblox Studio, select those instances, and then it can convert that into code, and it supports both React and Fusion and a couple others. So if you want to maintain your original workflow, this can help bridge that gap and still get you the benefits of having declarative code at the end of the day.
Thank you.
And something I'll plug really quick, it's not out yet, but it's in beta. We're working on style sheets, which are kind of Lua's version of CSS. So it kind of breaks out the styling part from the logic part. We've been using it internally, and what's really nice about that is, at a minimum, you can do the styling without code. Once you get into interactions, you need code somewhere, but that can help at least with the styling aspect. So 2025, very excited for it.
Hi, my name is Noah. I'm with Sawhorse. I'm formerly a product designer before I was a producer, and I use Figma like pretty much all day, every day. You know, I sensed a lot of you guys are using those same tools. Are there any plans for anyone to make some kind of like plugin for Figma or some way to like export, you know, code or snippets from Figma into those?
Someone is working on that. I don't know if they're in this. Aiden, are you in this room?
I'm looking at them right now.
Aiden is in this room.
Nice.
They're working on exactly that. I don't know too much, but I do know that there is stuff for Figma to Roblox, and they're the one working on that.
Thank you, and thank you. So.
One other thing is that I believe EgoMoose has a system for porting Photoshop to Roblox, so like PSD files as well.
So hi, I'm Evan. I'm a co-owner of TTD3. We're currently going through like a whole rewrite of our code, and we want to start actually using like a UI framework. We didn't want to use React because it was a little bit too bloated, and we wanted to start using Fusion, but it was in beta. Do you think with the recent update that has come out, I'm pretty sure, 3.0, right?
Yeah.
Would it be okay to use in prod like right now for a big game that's already established?
Here's the thing. So I started making Fusion like a long time ago, and immediately after 0.1, people were already using it in production, even though I told them not to do that. So basically, it's already been battle tested in production against my wishes. But now with 0.3, the official line is that every single version of Fusion, we battle test it as much as we can. It's shipping right now in my own plugins. It's shipping in Lua Learning. It's shipping in a million other places from a bunch of enthusiasts in the community. And so you should feel good about using Fusion in production. The only reason it's not 1.0 yet is because the design of the library, the design of the APIs is still subject to change. We want to give ourselves some room to make breaking changes if we find some fundamental thing isn't working quite the way we want it to expand in future. But right now, in terms of bugs, Fusion is absolutely doing fantastic. We make sure to test it really rigorously before we push anything out. So go ahead, use it in production. Just make sure you're willing to accept that maybe next version, we might introduce a new API, and maybe you might have to port to it.
All right, thank you so much.
Take some questions from that side now, please.
All right, Bob, you're up.
Hi. Yes, my name is WebGL3D. I'm primarily a web developer, very familiar with React. I'm curious if React is transpiled from JavaScript, how does it handle more advanced events? I can see things like mouse over and mouse leave, but how does it handle things like drag and drop events?
You want to take this one, Brooke?
Yeah. So React is translated from React.js, but it doesn't. Well, when you say how does it handle drag and drop events, it doesn't use web events. Are you familiar with how React works at all?
No.
OK. So when you create instances with React or any of these libraries, you connect or you hook into the events that those instances already have. So for something like drag and drop, that's something you would implement yourself. Is that anything to add to that?
Yeah.
Got it. So documented drag and drop events then would not be necessarily available in the Lua version of React.
Yeah, so I think the hang up here is that React is not itself necessarily web. When we say transpiled from JavaScript, we mean that the code itself is brought over to Lua, but not necessarily like any web-specific interactions. That is kind of a separate thing. React is even used for like native apps and stuff, but in the Roblox sense, you would have to implement that stuff yourself in anything.
Well, there's the new UI drag detectors that's native to the engine now. So that can be used with React to get that without having to do it all yourself.
Got it. Thank you.
Awesome. OK, question from the left.
Yep, so hi, I am Bonnabelle. I'm a software engineer, and I also use React.js every day in my day-to-day job. I was just wondering, I haven't used Fusion yet, or really React on Roblox. What is your process for testing right now? Is there any sort of automated unit testing we have available for React Fusion?
I unit test my stuff. I wouldn't know if I'd call it a solution. It's kind of hard because you can't so easily in anything test like mouse click because we don't have access to emulating specific inputs. But there are some magic tricks with React that I've found to be able to trigger things like activated and that kind of stuff. And once you get there, the workflow is actually quite nice. Brooke, who published the React Lua, has also published a transpile of Jest 3. I love it. You can run that in Studio with a bit of elbow grease. And I would say that it is passing right now in terms of can you unit test React? Yes, it's not super fun yet, but you can.
Are there any examples of those in the documentation that you're sharing today?
I mean, I can add real quick. The testing story in general in Roblox is a little bit interesting, as I'm sure those people in this room know. We have Jest now. These libraries are also published by Roblox now on the official Roblox GitHub. But they're distributed on Wally as RBXM files in various places. Jest is currently the recommended way to run tests in Roblox. And testing React specifically is what is the hang-up. We have React Testing Library, which is a translated version of Web's testing library for React. It has some blockers and some issues, but it sort of mostly works. We use it for a couple bits on ClipIt. We test, mainly the things we test on ClipIt is logic that's independent of rendering in React. Generally, I don't typically test the actual visual look of the components. And then, so could you repeat your last question?
I was just wondering if you had examples in the documentation. That's it.
I'll put it up when I get home. I'll make you some.
There you go.
That's a great request, because testing it's hard to know what good testing is. Yeah. And I think Nick and Tian mentioned it in the Creator All Hands yesterday, but there's a couple of blockers to really being able to leverage the libraries that we've made source available on Roblox for y'all to be able to use them properly. And we're working on a lot of things that are blocking that. So hopefully we'll be in a much better spot to make these easy to use next year. I think headless execution in the cloud is the main thing that's blocking it, because it's just hard to give access to something like virtual input, which DOM testing library and React testing library rely really heavily on. So we are working on it, I guarantee it.
But also to add to the React testing story, I'm going to be releasing React DevTools in a few weeks, which will allow you to inspect the React rendering. Thank you. Yeah, here you go. It'll allow you to inspect the React rendering tree, profile your React components. It tells you why components were rendered. Lots of cool stuff, hopefully releasing in the next roughly a month. We'll see. A lot of work to get it working.
So excited for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, I am ThoughtSpinner. I used to go by Rocky. I'm a bit of a React fanboy, so this is a question for Dan. So Fusion has been around for a good number of years now, and it's often billed as a great UI library for Roblox because it's designed specifically for the engine and can therefore take advantage of engine-specific quirks to make it fast. However, to this day, almost every benchmark ran against it shows that it performs 2 times slower than React, or close to it. And it's about on par with legacy React in terms of performance. Considering this and a number of other factors working against it compared to React, such as the stability of the API and just sheer number of maintainers, my question is a bit of a two-parter. What is the actual practical justification for using Fusion over React today? And do you believe Fusion ever can or will match or beat out React in terms of performance?
All right, so firstly, wow. And secondly,
I spent my entire morning writing that question.
Yeah, I can tell. Like, this is something, I've seen it come up time and time again in the open source Discord, which, by the way, everyone in here, like, the open source Discord is amazing. There are so many cool people there, more than could ever fit on a stage like this, so you should be there. But anyway, I digress. So, Fusion, right now we're focused on correctness over performance. We want to get it right before we get it fast. And so 0.3 in particular, the latest update, was all about reworking the foundations of Fusion to support more structured memory management and to make sure that code was running with more correct dependency tracking. And as a result of that, Fusion has gotten slower. And we are not oblivious to that. I know that it's frustrating because people do want to, like, they want to make 1,000 frames that are animating with springs all on the screen at once, and it's like confetti everywhere, and that's fantastic, and I love that, but also we need some time to get there. And we are going to be working on this much more as a priority now. With the forthcoming Fusion updates, we are now starting to really put spit, shine, and polish on everything. But something else I want to mention as well is when it comes to those benchmarks, they are often like stress tests that are testing things that you really shouldn't be doing in production. Like if you have like 1,000 frames in a square with like some rainbow pearl and noise, just use an editable image, right? Like, but they're useful for measuring the hot paths of Fusion, the most critical parts of the code, and that's really important for us as maintainers. But for you, if you are using UI frameworks in your projects, you will probably not be writing code in the same way. So while they're useful for us as maintainers, I would also encourage you to try and benchmark your own code and to try things out in your own style to see what your style of code performs like. So that's my answer to those questions.
I will also say very quickly, as also a big React fan, I have to confess that Fusion is it's easier to write performant code with Fusion. React can be very, very, very performant, but it's also, unfortunately, a little easy to write very naive code that does a lot of stuff like in a render thing, and it doesn't have like memos or whatever, and then you end up losing a bunch of performance, and without dev tools, it can be hard to figure out where that's even coming from. So yeah, I'm surprised to hear about the benchmarks.
I wanted to point out that pretty much the same thing, where it's about the best practices, and these benchmarks do not follow them, kind of intentionally. But in the real world use cases, Lua Learning is a large app full of UI, things animating. I do have confetti and fireworks, and even when the Fusion confetti and fireworks are all going off, it's still running at over 1,000 frames per second with animations. I think you'll find that in practice, in real use cases with real code that's not, kind of contrived Sierpinski triangle benchmarks, Fusion will often outperform React.
Sweet, thanks.
Okay, we'll take a question from the left, and then we'll get back to y'all.
Yeah, I'm actually glad that question was asked because I had a lot of the same questions. So yeah, good answer. I guess this is more of a question for the Roblox side. I know that Noah had asked about porting Figma to Roblox. That would be really powerful. Kind of piggybacking off of that. Is there a way to get vector files like SVG into Roblox? Because I'm pretty sure people have had it where they try and resize like a box, right, from a photo editor, and then becomes like pixelated. So I really wonder if we'll have like SVG and make everything a lot easier.
I can say confidently that every time we've brought up SVG support, we've been met with a resounding no. For reasons that I don't know. But that doesn't mean they're not important, and that doesn't mean it's something that we're not looking into. In fact, we had this amazing presentation by one of the designers on my team this week about trying to do the same thing with our icons. And one of the things, like I mentioned, that Roblox developers, like employees working on the app, we are building stuff in React Lua, and we're using plugins to develop, and we have designers that work in Figma. So we actually run into a lot of the same problems as you all, even though we have, a couple things like virtual input. So I can at least say, don't worry, we have the same things, and we are fighting for it internally, and it might end up being solved in a different way than you might think. Yeah.
Yeah, this is on my roadmap. I have a working plan for how to render vectors in Roblox. Not going to talk about it too much here, but keep an eye out the next few months. It's near the top of my to-do list because we have the same problem in Clip It. We want really crisp icons and images, and I have a good plan for how to make that work performantly. So
cool.
Yeah.
Sounds exciting. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, and also I'll just quickly add on to that. I think I actually am a little bit more privy to the reasons why SVG isn't a thing. SVG files can contain things like JavaScript, and they can contain really complicated blend modes. And so implementing SVG support is a little bit more than just, we'll take this library and we'll put it here. It's like we'd have to redo a lot of rendering stuff in order to support that. But also, on top of that, definitely watch out for what Brooke is doing, because, I don't know how you're not employed by Roblox yet, because you seem to be powering the entire open source ecosystem at this point. It's amazing. So I would definitely, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got a couple minutes left, so I want to try to get through all these questions. You are up.
Hey everyone, I'll keep my question quick. I'm Varun. I actually work at Roblox, but I was interested in UI. Could you talk a little bit about how both React and Fusion help with collaborative workflow? So multiple people with different roles. So like a designer working with an engineer, and how you work together with them.
I can at least talk about it from the Roblox perspective. Of course, we use Git, and my team works on the UI component library. And we've done a lot of cool things to help work with designers, because we're a really small engineering team with a lot of designers. We have used the Open Cloud Place publishing thing to actually publish a version of Storybook that's embedded so that our designers can go and verify that our stuff works well and make sure that all of the props are defined as controls. And that has been a really cool value add that we were like, oh, this is going to be really hard. And it turns out it was really easy. And in general, just giving the ability for designers to try it out without having to download Studio has been a really big value add for us, because I think that can be a little daunting for our designers. Anyone want to add?
Yeah, for us, we're a pretty small engineering team. We don't have any dedicated designers on our team, but we move quickly, constantly pushing new updates, meeting milestones. The way we do that is with components and just kit bashing. It's kind of like Lego. Once you have enough small little building bricks, you kind of get to the point where you don't even have to think about the primitives like frames, because you have enough abstraction that you could just throw stuff at it and it looks good every time. So,
And also, I'll jump in on that as well. If you have a system using design tokens, or if you have to do like font size conversions from Figma, then it's very easy in code to write reusable functions that hide all of that. And then when it comes to actually templating out your UI, you can literally drop in references to variables that come from like your centralized design system. And so if you're working on a team, you can have the people in charge of the design system putting out generic reusable code that you can then plug right into the UI right where you're writing it. And so that's like the killer application for like UI frameworks in a collaborative setting.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. OK, maybe second to last question. Go with you on the left.
Hello, I am Liz Zinnemann. I do UI for Phantom Forces, and I traditionally work in the 16:9 aspect ratio. And so the challenge for me is how do I scale to mobile screens or iPad screens or whatever dimensions. And this is more of an open design question for any of you guys, and in any framework, or how you guys would approach this problem while capturing, say, a lot of advanced stats for weapons, like graphs, or like just having a list of items that people want to look at.
So is this asking about how you would write that, or are you asking more about just like general design and layout?
Let's start with the layout. I think that's a big challenge, just visualizing how things should move. So what I can do is I cheat with borders and just keep it as a 16:9 ratio regardless of what the screen size is. And I want to see if you guys have any better ideas to that.
So one of the things that I did focus on when rewriting Lua Learning was it didn't look great on a lot of screens, and now it can adapt where when testing, right, you're not hitting play, you're just using a plugin. So you can then just wiggle your screen size around and see how your app responds to that. And as you have your declarative layout, you kind of just follow the general rules of design of like, breaking the screen into thirds and making sure that the relevant information is most prominent. So in Figma or whatever you use to design, use the top 3 aspect ratios that your game sees. Your analytics can help you spot what you need to be supporting. And then from there, create those designs, and then you can have your app respond to that really easily when you declaratively define how this should lay out.
I forgot entirely until you brought it up that if you're doing play solo, you can't change the device emulator thing on the fly, can you? You can in HorseCat. I do that all the time. I completely forgot that. That's awesome.
Yeah, and also to add on to that as well, in Lua Learning, something key that me and Zach both did is that all of the sizes and positions of stuff are defined in our own custom units that are based directly on factors like screen size and which can be adjusted by users in settings. And so it's essentially like the text scaling that Roblox has natively now, except for everything. And this is something that's really, really like obnoxiously difficult to do without a UI framework. But whether it's React, whether it's Fusion, the moment you have a structure within which you can start like integrating code into your UI, it's really easy to define your own unit system that's based on the screen size or based on whatever other like layout heuristics you have. And you can just use it for everything. And you can just like say, well, if the screen size is like 200 units wide, then this will have the split layout, or it will just have like the stack layout below that. And it all just adapts. And you can make it configurable for your users so they can find like the density that works for them. So really, like, that was like the single best thing we did for accessibility.
Honestly, I got so used to having that, I forgot that that's not a normal thing. I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, because I know some people try to do it with like UI scale and like the screen GUI, but that breaks everything. So like, yeah, just use frameworks.
Please check out the new Flex API. It makes stuff like getting things to wrap when you're on too small of screens so easy. It has saved us like so many lines of code in rewriting our components.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you for your question. I think that's all the time we have. All right. Thank you all for coming.